Hey everybody, another episode of It Came From the Studio, actually from the studio today. I am sitting down, I'm just actually tidying up the table. It's a disaster right now from some recording yesterday. Getting ready to set up and film some more Forbidden Psalm, which I'm pretty excited about. And this is a second half of a review I promised to do when I did my, not review, it's about reviews. Second half of the It Came From the Studio I promised to do when I talked about Curse City stuff. So the thing I wanted to talk about was reviews, and how I do reviews and what reviews are to me, and what I look for in reviews. And I thought that was useful because actually a little bit of this popped in my head and became a thing I wanted to talk about because something actually happened during the Curse City launch in the Curse City Facebook group that I was really uncomfortable with. And it was my review of, or my Let's Play of Curse City. Actually, it was It Came From the Studio about Curse City, and Joel Eddy from Drive Thru Reviews review of Curse City, like being juxtaposed to each other. And the people in the comments actually almost implying that he and I were at odds in their sort of like discussion and tone, and that he and I were like in some way at loggerheads over this or enemies over this. And so I really wanted to do this. It Came From the Studio. Just first of all, just to clear that up, I really respect Joel. Joel was actually one of my first ever patrons. He was a really early patron on Patreon. That dude has a ton of experience with tabletop games, way more experience with board games than I have, and I really respect his opinion. He's one of the people I actually watch his videos about things, and he takes the time usually to try it before he speaks about it, and his process and thought process are really similar to mine. And to be like super clear, he and I can have different opinions, and that's okay. And I think that that's really valuable, actually, to see his contrasting opinion to my opinion about something, because that's useful. People need to be able to see both sides of something, and what he thought about it is just as valid and valuable as what I thought about it. And to have contrasting reviews out there, it made me really uncomfortable that people were dividing into camps over it and arguing as if he and I were leading two sides of a discussion. And that was actually what initiated me wanting to talk about how I do reviews and stuff, and what my thoughts about the reviews were, and just reviews online in general. Because there's some interesting stuff that I think maybe in my mind, I assume people know, that you probably don't, because this isn't anything I've really talked about before, but how I do tons of reviews. I review tons of books. I review tons of games. I do Let's Plays for tons of games. Sometimes I'll do a review first and then a Let's Play afterwards. Sometimes I'll do a Let's Play first and then a review afterwards. And there's thought behind that in my head. And so I thought this would be maybe a valuable discussion for people to hear. And again, I actually made notes. It's funny, as I do these used to be so on the fly. I actually write notes and I try to keep myself on track, as if I was giving like a lecture, because I don't want to get off topic. And as you all know, I tend to ramble and prattle on. So there's the history. That's basically what I want to talk about, why I wanted to do this discussion and do this. It Came From the Studio. So yeah, so Joel's great. I don't disagree with anything Joel says, because that's Joel's opinion. And my opinion and his opinion are allowed to be different, and that's totally fine. And so the second thing is, what do I look for in reviews? And how do I seek out information online? I don't do it very often, to be honest with you. I seek out information online much more, very seldom about this stuff, because I have a lot of experience with this stuff. So it completely makes sense that I don't actually look at a lot of tabletop gaming or miniature wargaming reviews, because they don't add much for me. I tend to seek out my own opinions about that kind of stuff, because I have a lot of subject matter knowledge about it. And so it's not something that I go and look for opinions on. But what I do tend to go and look for opinions on and reviews on is stuff I don't know about, which is exactly what people are typically doing when they probably watch my reviews, or things I'm not an expert on. So I'll look at some reviews for things like outdoor gear, or car parts, or stuff to fix. If I want to upgrade like an appliance in my home, like that's where I'm like, well, I don't know as much about this as other people do, and I have choice A and choice B. I'm gonna go and try and seek out some subject matter experts to try and find out information about it. And then how do I go about that? Because I think that actually informs more than anything else how I go about doing reviews. I tend to go and seek out people. I don't like written reviews very often. unless they're accompanied by tons of photos of the thing I'm looking at actually in use. And there was a dude who used to review like tents and hammocks and backpacks and like hiking boots and even other things like water filtering systems and stuff. And he wasn't super tech savvy. He had a few videos, but for the most part, he just would go out and use it. He would like GoPro camera things every now and again, but just take photos of like before and after using stuff. And going through lots of different reviews for things like, you know, outdoor gear, where it actually has a real, like, your satisfaction can be very much informed based on how it performs. So like if you buy a tent and that tent isn't, for instance, like well, like seam taped, you can have water get into it, or it doesn't vent well, you can like the moisture from your breath can get into it, and you're waking up in a soaking wet sleeping bag and it just totally sucks. So it's worth going and doing some research before you spend hundreds of dollars on something like that, or even thousands of dollars on a piece of equipment that's going to really impact your satisfaction on your experience with whatever it is you're going out and doing. Same goes for skis, motorcycles, cars, like tons of things where it's a relatively big investment. And hobby stuff is a pretty big investment these days, so it makes sense if people are going looking for that. But I want to actually see the opinion of someone who's used it, who has actual real life experience, because I could find tons of reviews usually on people who had been, I mean, they're just like a website writer, and they've been sent a copy of it, and they open it on their desk and they look at it and they go, the fabric seems pretty cool, and the seams look okay. But that doesn't actually tell me how it's performed. That's a person who, they might have some experience with that type of thing in the past, look at like just handling it and looking at it and going, man, this seems like this is pretty cool and that's pretty cool. And they might give me some information, but that doesn't tell me how it actually performed out in the world. And so I usually look for seeing it actually in use, and that proves to me that person's actually used it. And then typically even like a first blush review of like using it once, I don't tend to like actually, I don't tend to invest in new equipment. I tend to invest in equipment that's been around for a while, that people have used for like weeks and months and years, because then it's got like an actual track record. So I look for large patterns of evidence as opposed to typically single things. And that for me, like a track record, and then I'll go back to that person if they tend to do that more often than not. And I won't necessarily invest in something they've tried once, but if over like the course of weeks and months, they go, yeah, and I brought this again because I really liked it and I used it a whole bunch of times, I go, huh, that's pretty cool. That's a cool camping stove, or that's a cool, I don't know, like, it could be anything, like a sleeping bag or hammock or a fly or, you know, whatever. And then I'll tend to listen to that person, or seek out that person's, you know, knowledge about something going forward into the future. And that goes for other things too. That goes for like the people in my life that I ask it like life advice from. I tend to ask advice from people who've been and done something before I'll ask advice from people who maybe are not familiar with whatever situation or thing I'm dealing with, because then you just get a better answer. And that's just my look at how I try and seek out information and reviews and opinions basically on stuff. And so something I'm mistrustful of other opinions, but I don't tend to stack other opinions to actually make my decision. I tend to look for people who've actually had experience or used something, not saying, oh, it might work like this, or, oh, my experience with other things like this says it's going to work this way. That's not the same thing as actually using what's there. And so let's jump in now. So we're on point number 3. That was a very long point number 2 of how I look for information. See it in practice, look at the track record of the person that's talking. And so point number 3 is, how does that inform how I do reviews? Well, so I like to try and provide objective information. And one of the things people have commented on with how I do reviews in the past is he doesn't give a lot of opinions. Well, so for instance, if a new book is not even out yet and I get sent it to review, all I have with the experience with this book, I've never played a game with it, I've never played a game against it. I haven't seen, you know, the actual impact of how it's gonna work. All I have is reading through it as my objective like experience with it. So I don't like to give a ton of opinions. I can give comparisons and parallels, but I can't say this is good, this is bad. And what I tend to focus more on is the thing that I do have real life experience with, which is the physical book itself and what's inside it. So I never like to speak in what ifs, right? In like, hey, maybe this army is going to work this way, or maybe this game is going to play like that. What I can do is I can say, oh, this compares, you know, favorably to another mechanic from another game that I have played. And like, oh, I recognize that mechanic, oh, I recognize this mechanic. And you'll hear me do that in games and go like, oh, it kind of works like X or Y, right? And I liked X or Y in this game, and so that's a component I'm picking out of what I'm reviewing or I'm looking at right now that I'm probably going to like in this. But what I won't say is this is good, this is crap, you know what I mean? After not having any experience with it, because that's just disingenuous. Like a lot of people I see doing reviews, if they haven't actually played a game with it, like there's no way they can have played a game with it. It's not even out yet. You know what I mean? There's no way for them to actually say X or Y. And a lot of hyperbole gets thrown on the internet where it's valuable to get attention to say X and Y. But I don't tend to do that and that's why I waited until after my Let's Play and playing 5 games to do a review of Curse City. I needed to play 5 games of it to actually go like, oh, I like this and oh, I like that. And this felt grindy or, you know, whatever it was that was my actual like formed opinion, because I didn't have a formed opinion during the Let's Play. I'd played like one, just to get the mechanics down, like solo game. And then I started recording, right? So that was, you can see that if you ever want to like just see that like thought process in my head in action, you can literally look at the videos the week of that like Let's Play for Curse City. I had experience with the models because I built and painted them all. So I did on the paint table and talked about that. I had experience with the game barely during the Let's Play. So I just said, here's the mechanics, here's us playing through it. Let's just give objective information on what the game's like and not actually speak to like, do I like this, do I not like this yet? But here's what I thought about this experience and here's the experience I'm about to have. And then after 5 games, I did a video going, hey, I've played 5 games now. Here's all the things I noticed. Here's how I felt about it. So that's where, I mean, this is framing this whole, why am I doing this video? But you could go back and look at other videos where I've done the same thing, where like, for instance, my review of Stargrave, I talk about it in comparison to Frostgrave because it's not a sequel, but it's a spiritual successor in a science fiction setting to Frostgrave. And then after I played some games, I talk more about what I think about it. And during the expansions, when they come out, I'll talk more about what I think about the game, because I've actually played a bunch of missions and seen sort of like the impact that the rules have. And so then it comes down to impact. And one of the reasons I think it's so important for me to do that and only speak to what I actually know and I've actually experienced is I affect people's decision-making by doing reviews. That's the nature of reviews. If people come and seek information from you, that can affect their yes or no. I might buy this, I might not buy this, I might be excited about it, I might not be excited about it. And I have to respect that. I have to respect that even more so when I review smaller things like this, like Forbidden Psalm. Because for Kevin to sell, I'm just gonna make up a number. I don't know if this is true or not, but let's say Kevin, after I did the Forbidden Psalm video, the review, and then I played a game, let's say he sold 100 copies of his book. For a one-man operation, that is an enormous like impact on his life. But imagine I'd said I didn't like it and I thought it was crap. Imagine the impact that could have inversely on the potential sales that he could be, the people that might have bought it that don't buy it all of a sudden. And so I tend to speak more freely about larger game products like Games Workshop products, based on my experience with them, right? Because I've played a ton of Games Workshop games in the past, so I can say this worked like this worked like that. And the nice thing is with Games Workshop products, they don't tend to vary very far from the core mechanics that they've made and that they're comfortable with. So there's a lot of experience, like past experience to draw upon to draw analogies and go like, oh, this is just like in Black Sun Fortress, or oh, this is just like in Space Hulk, or oh, this is just like in 2nd edition Warhammer 40k. It's easy to mine that experience when a company doesn't tend to shift very far away. And also 100 missed sales, if I say something, I don't like something or X or Y, or people get the impression I'm not a fan of something, or I don't talk about it a whole bunch later on, they're not going to miss those sales. People are going to buy that stuff anyway. And like, I'm a tiny voice in that community. But for someone who has no other real like review potential or voice otherwise, with the reach that I have, I can make a huge impact. And so I have to be respectful of that, I think, when I do reviews. And that's why I have these sort of self-imposed rules for how I speak about things and how I talk about things and how I review them. And then I want to have experience with them before I give like maybe a value judgment or a value judgment even on mechanics. And then I'll only sort of speak in terms of, sort of similar mechanics or things that I've seen in the past that are similar in that regard. And that's it. And those are really the sort of the key rules that I have when I do reviews. That's how I do reviews. So that's why I've got this man who reads books joke name, right? the Warhammer Age of Sigmar world, because I literally just like, I'll go through the book typically, and if it compares to past books, if it's a follow-up book or a new edition of a book, you'll see me do a much more comparative review where I'll even pull up the old War Scrolls on my phone and go through them. But if it's a brand new thing, there's no experience for me to lean on, or if I haven't played the army, there's no experience for me to lean on. I'll tend to just objectively give the information and go, well, it looks like this model is designed to do X or Y, or this army is designed to do X or Y, and here's some of the inherent obvious combinations. But I'm not going to say that's good or that's bad, or this looks like the best one to take. And some people are looking for that. And that leads me up to point number 4 here, is what should you do? What should you do when you're seeking out information? And I think that that's a very personal thing. And this is one of the reasons why I want to do the video, is to try and clearly explain how I try and present information. Because some people come to a review for a tabletop game to try and find out what is the best tabletop game. I get asked that all the time, and that is an impossible question to answer because I don't know what the person asked me actually wants out of a tabletop game. And if I don't know that, I can't tell them the right answer. I can tell them what I like, but that has nothing to do with potentially what they actually like, right? So there's a real disconnect, I think, sometimes when I get asked, like, what are your top 5 favorite tabletop games? That will tell you what my top 5 favorite tabletop games are. And some people might find that interesting, but doesn't say what the best top 5 tabletop games are. And I think if you see someone post a video where the title is the 5 best blah games of all time, just remember, they're giving their tops. They're not necessarily going to be your tops. And so your mileage varies on everything. And so that leads to this last bit, which is what I think you should do, is you should ask yourself, what am I looking for in the information out there? So am I looking for the best of something? Am I looking for, like, for instance, what's the best army list combos out of a new army book or battle tome that's just dropped? Well, you're never going to get that from a preview review, ever, because no one's played with it. There's been no, like, tournaments around where that army took place in it. That information just doesn't exist yet, because even the people who think they know are just coming up with raw ideas, and none of it's been tested in reality. So it's all bullshit. Anything anybody says is going to be the best or the worst. It's their opinion, but it's all just made up at this point, because typically there hasn't been any actual, like, playtesting and proof. And while they might get close to what ends up being, like, the best combination or wombo combo or whatever, there's gonna be iterations, and it's gonna boil down and become better and change as more books and stuff come out. If you're looking for just information about something, like what's in it, then you're much more likely to be able to get that right away from, like, a preview review or something like that, or, you know, a review of a physical thing. Because, like, that's something else to think about, is when I review a book, I'm reviewing the book. I'm not reviewing the information in the book. I'm reviewing this physical object. So I'm talking about all kinds of things. Like, I'm talking about the art, I'm talking about the layout, I'm talking about the design, I'm talking about the information, what it contains. But I'm not necessarily going to be talking about what is the best combo wombo thing in it. That's not what the review is. The review is about the physical object and what it contains, not the information inside. I think a lot of people get confused with that, is they think that the metaphysical attribute, the in-game effect of something, is what's being reviewed, but it's actually the physical object that's being reviewed when you review a book. And so I think that is the best way to look for information, is how is the person I'm listening to telling me the information that I'm looking for? So are they the right subject matter expert for what I'm looking for? Do they have experience with it? And that's a really important thing to ask yourself, because anybody talking to you on day one about something that hasn't tried it, played it, or whatever, they are giving fly by the seat of your pants information to you about it. They might say, oh, my years of background in whatever, playing all these games, gives me the ability to speak with authority on this. Unless you've actually touched something in real life and done it, you're making up your answer. Your answer is not based on any kind of real life experience until you've actually experienced the thing. To say I hate a movie and I've never watched it, you might still hate it after you watch it. Great, but watch it first. You know what I mean? Or I hate an album, I haven't listened to it. Listen to it first, and you might still hate that album, but you can't. You're not telling the truth. It's not a real opinion. I mean, it's a real opinion, but it's not based on any kind of reality. So you, as the consumer of that information, need to take it with a grain of salt. So if someone hasn't played something, they haven't, like, read something or looked at something or have any experience with anything similar like it in the past. Even if they do have something similar like it in the past, you still have to take even my opinion at the beginning with a grain of salt, because it's not a real opinion until it's based in actual evidence or actual even anecdotal evidence of having played it or experienced it or tried it. And that I think is really important. That's, for me, that's the number one thing with reviews, and especially even my own reviews. And it's why I tend to speak more cautiously about everything, even big products like Games Workshop products, because I don't want to give a made up opinion that's not based in some kind of fact. And I try to focus my reviews on the actual thing being reviewed, because it's the thing I have actual experience with. I'm trying to be honest, and I'm trying to keep into the realm of just not making shit up. Not making shit up. And I mean, it's a real popular thing on the internet to make shit up and to have high-flying opinions, because it gets your views, it gets you subscribers. People want to be entertained, and that is entertaining. It's infotainment. To me, that's the info news, the infotainment news, 24-hour news cycle of like tabletop, versus trying to give like an objective, grounded in reality, grounded in experience type of review. And so, but that might not be what you're looking for. You might want to be entertained. And so for those people that want to be entertained, go keep being entertained. But I hope this has cleared up how I do reviews, how I think about reviews and what reviews are, and how I seek out information online and stuff like that. And if it just makes you think about maybe how you get the best information for yourself, and who you listen to, and what your sort of like experiences are. And I'll get it wrong in the future. I will. I will say an opinion that might not be based in reality, but these are the sort of like the touchstones that I go back to when I think about something. I try and talk about it. Then yeah, hopefully the man who reads books will keep reading books, and you folks will keep enjoying those segments and stuff. And you know a little bit more about my thought process and what goes into it, and you think for yourself a little bit more about what you consume when you think about the information you get online. So it is another, it came from the studio, this time actually from the studio. Hope you enjoyed that. I'll see you next time for another one. Till then, I'm Ash. Have a great gaming.